let's talk for a second to Nick, pronouns he, him, calling in all the way from cactus angles. We're talking about spiky things in interesting shapes. I don't know. Who has a question about trans people? Nick, you're on the line with Forrest and John. How are you doing today?
I'm well, thank you. How are you guys?
Never had a bad day, man.
Doing all right.
You know that Jesus gave up almost a whole weekend for your sins, right?
Yeah, so I've heard.
Yeah, so it must be your church hurt that makes you hate him so much. But my question is this. I think you guys do a great job of explaining trans rights, and I believe firmly in trans rights. And, I think the basic issue is that they deny that there's a difference between sex and gender. But I'm wondering if it might not be an alternate approach, a second approach, to talk to them about why they care. Because I don't think, I think that the results of everything that's happened recently is that two people who are athletes, are no longer allowed to play the sports that they were playing because of all that's happened. And it seems like it affects so few people. Not that those people aren't important and don't deserve, every right that everyone else has, and especially the right to dignity. But what I'm saying is that it affects so few people that their concern about the issue is overblown. And I think it's overblown because of a bunch of crooks, a bunch of grifters who make them care for their own ends. And I'm wondering if...
Yeah, definitely asking people why they're upset about trans folks is important in its own right. Because at the end of the day, you are correct to say that a bunch of politicians are making this an issue. Trans people account for a tiny portion of the population, and a bunch of politicians are making it out that there's this massive problem and blah, 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 blah. And here's the thing for me, is the reason why I don't land on that argument of why do you care, these are so few people, is because it doesn't address the fundamental issue that it doesn't matter if this accounts for 99% of the population or literally one person in the country. My argument would be the same, which is about basic rights and dignity and like the existence of these people. There is scientific backing for these people, but even without that, we're just talking about being a person and having fundamental, basic rights and dignity at any other person should be afforded. Maybe just start with the fact that you can be kicked out of your home, you can be evicted for being trans. Like we can start there. You know what I mean? Like I think when you compound that on top of the fact that like the attack ads that are being levied against these people by the tiny percent of the population they are, we're talking about millions of dollars being spent for every trans person to put national news out saying how evil they are. But at the end of the day, that I think is very important to be a secondary, if not a tertiary conversation, because the primary conversation needs to be about like, why is it acceptable to you to pick and choose who you do and do not think is it okay to discriminate against? I just think you should just not discriminate against people. And if you don't understand somebody, then you should ask some questions or maybe just shut the fuck up. Because at the end of the day, all of the anti-trans arguments that I deal with on a daily basis and all the ones that I see being levied all over the world and with the news media, social media, whatever, are literally word for word the exact same arguments that were being used when I was in high school against same-sex marriage. It's the same bioessentialist, we have to maintain a civilization and the fall of Rome and blah, blah, blah. It's the same brainless, dumb shit, just with a new scapegoat in mind, because if we hurt these people, maybe that'll solve our problems this time. And that isn't how thinking works, and that isn't how progress works. So I want that to be where I focus my arguments. If you have a different argument style, feel free to try it. But for me, it just doesn't work for me.
I agree with you that about the Prime Directive. Mm-hmm. I just think that the arguments can exist side by side, and possibly sort of the arguments can possibly develop sort of a symbiotic relationship.
Sure, but like I said, I think they need to be secondary or tertiary. I don't think you should lean on that alone, because at the end of the day, what that sounds like to me is, listen, it's okay to hate these people, just don't make it a priority. You know what I mean?
No.
I don't think that's what you're saying, but I know that's what a transphobe will hear.
Part of my argument is that the reason that they care is because they're made to care. In other words, I mean, you know, they've always been sort of crotch sniffy in my experience all my life. You know, it's always been sort of a sex thing that they sort of focus on. But I think, I don't know, I think that they could be made not to care as much as they do for the right reason, for both right reasons. For the reason,
you know what, if you
that you described,
if you can find a way to convince a transphobe not to care, call back in and let me know about it. But as of right now, they are transvestigating the Pope, y'all. So I don't know what else to tell you. It seems to me like the state of people's genitals is the primary concern for a lot of people out there. And so it should be our primary concern to make sure that human rights and advocacy is our primary concern, especially as allies, especially as cisgender people. John, you look like you're about to say something.
Well, yeah, I guess I'm rather perplexed by the idea that you can convince transphobes to not care as much in this particular respect. The transvestigating the Pope is a good example. There's also another example of, I believe in Boston, there was a hotel that actually they forced a gender check on a couple of women that were going to use the public restroom in the hotel. Mm-hmm. I remember that happened while I was on vacation. And I think that it's crazy to think that you can actually get, you know, people that are doing these types of things to just not care about those things anymore. I feel like it's been catapulted into the public sphere so hard, and it's been focused on so much that I think that these types of people, that is what they're focusing on. Like, it's just like in the 1950s and prior to the 1950s, where you know, people were highly focused on like segregation and like suppressing the rights of people of color. And I really don't think that I feel like it's a subject that's here to stay, and that the people that are so intensely focused on it now, I don't think that there's anything that we can say necessarily that will get them to focus away from it or not take it so seriously. I think the only way that that's going to happen is if, you know, they stop doing it themselves. And I think the only thing that we can do is just consistently push back against the bigotry that's levied in the LGBTQ community's direction. I think if we band together and we all say we're not going to stand for this, like as a community here in America, just in general, I think that is the way that we'll eventually, you know, phase it out of the public discussion. But you know, I think that it's going to take a long time.
I appreciate you guys. I think that those were great answers. I really appreciate that. I'm a big fan. And the last thing I want to say is, there may be a God. I can't prove there isn't, but I'm sure there isn't an intelligent designer, because no supreme intelligence would design a world in which any grifter or moron could claim to speak for him.
That is the definition of the problem, isn't it? I would also encourage you, Nick. You know, John and I, much to the public chagrin, are not the trans whisperers And so, like, if you want to hear if you want to talk more about, I'm happy to have this conversation, but also, there are real live trans people out there that host call-in shows just like this. So I would encourage talking to them as well and see what arguments they find are effective and best serve their purposes of reminding people that they exist and that they don't deserve to be made into political pawns for dumbass discussions. So I would call Arden Hart and Dr. Ben and Katie Montgomery and Luxander and Josie Caballero and talk to them about why they do what they do and the success and failures that they've had talking to different people of different stripes, and what they think is the most important way, the most effective way for you to be an ally to them. I think that would be a much better conversation than talking to me about what argument style that I use as yet another cishet white man on the internet.
I would like to echo that sentiment. I am just another cishet white dude, white hick hillbilly dude from North Alabama. So like, I'm probably not the best person to go to for that.
Anyway, thank you very much, Nick. I appreciate you calling in and talking to us, kicking off the show.